Hey, this is Seth and Whiskey here. This is the mascot of Watch the Tech. And before the guest joins for today, I wanted to tell the people a little bit about the watch that started it all. And yes, I am bribing her with treats so that she'll hang around and not run off. So the year was 2017. And I'd been a enterprise account executive at New Relic for a little while. And so I'd been exposed to a lot of cool watches by this point. I had a lot of my coworkers, and I wanted one. I wanted to mark the occasion, and I wanted one. And so I started this search for a watch, and I wanted something that was classic yet sturdy, something I could wear in just about any situation, something under the radar, and also something that was perfect for travel. Ultimately, I landed on the Omega Globemaster, which is this watch right here. It's beautiful. I still wear it a couple of times a week. I probably read and watched every video on the watch, and I'm glad that I did because it has never disappointed me, and I've been so happy with it the entire time. I would never ever trade this watch. Oh, a little bit more treat action. There we go. Perfect. And I ultimately bought it from European Watch Company in Boston. I've actually now bought a couple of watches from them. It's a great store, and it's just the watch that I look at that reminds me to work hard, and you can get the things that you want in life. So our guest is going to be in shortly. Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Seth Klebe, the host of Watch the Tech. It's a beautiful Friday. Work is done, and I've got my guest here, Matt Gray. Matt Gray, welcome to Watch the Tech.
Hey Seth, it's a pleasure to be here. Super excited. It's nice Friday afternoon and it's wonderful out.
Yes, indeed. So you just flew back from New York yesterday. You
I
were at a
did.
AWS conference.
I did. Yeah, the Summit series run around, but I mean, over the past 18 months, I've been in 16 countries. So it's been an extremely hectic travel schedule.
Well, I'm glad you're back home now in San Francisco. Hopefully, you get a little bit of time to recover before you go off and jet set to your next location. Well, what I'm going to do here is I want to just tell the people a little bit about you and your background, and then let's talk watches, man.
All right.
Perfect. So, where you started was Dell Boomi, where you ultimately ran a worldwide field sales organization. You then went over to MuleSoft, I think pre-Salesforce acquisition, where you ran worldwide ISV sales over there. And then New Relic, where we met, and you were running the US Alliances and Channels division. And so all of this has led you to a 4+ year run at Tealium as the global VP of partnerships. And last year, you were voted Wired Magazine's third best hand model.
Things that can pop up. It's funny what the internet can give you. I've been in the work world for a very long time, and so I actually found I trimmed off a bunch of stuff off of LinkedIn because going through companies where I've been acquired by IBM twice and had to deal with things in the background. I worked for Hewlett Packard for a while, but it's crazy because my journey really started, with my undergrad in engineering, right? It's understanding problems, appreciating and solving complex challenges. Operational workflows and other things fell under the discipline I was in, which was architectural engineering. But I'd spent all this time in computers and it was like, oh, Excel sheets, spreadsheets, I could do that. Programming, I could do that. So I got a job as a consultant writing 4GL code to pull data from ERP systems and generate reports. And it was the first real tech job I had. And one of the things that was interesting about it is because I was the new guy and because I had no binding, attachments, they would come into our sort of bullpen and they'd be like, can anybody go to Brazil for 3 weeks? And I'd be like, oh, I'll go. Brazil sounds great. Can anybody go to India for a month? It's like, I can do this. I don't have anywhere I need to be. So it led me to all these different places to get to experience travel business travel and to get to learn technology from the perspective of the line of business owner that's trying to answer a question. And once I got to see that, I was hooked, but I didn't want to be hooked as a consultant. I wanted to get into the sales side. I wanted to get into that functional front end, be the mouthpiece in front of the org. So transitioned over, and the stuff you picked up on LinkedIn is where that journey really just started to get more and more out in front. And I love being in front of customers, being in front of partners, and it's been a fun ride so far.
That's awesome. There really is kind of like a resume behind the resume, so I'm glad that you added to that. Well, since you mentioned the travel, I'm just dying to know, do you travel with a specific watch? Because, you're in countries where maybe it's like, could be a little bit sketchy. You're in areas or you've just never been there before. How do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. That is a big topic of consideration. I mean, I have the Apple Watch. I think most people have one of these in their drawer. That is a worldwide watch. I could lose it tomorrow, give it away, get robbed for it. I wouldn't even worry about it. I'd replace it right away. The plan really for me, going into specific countries is being mindful of your environment. So there are areas where you would not wear something that's a nice timepiece, because when you look at the considerations of economics and just your personal safety, and you think about what that could be worth to that individual, it's just not worth it. I remember being on the street in Rio de Janeiro with some of our team at New Relic, and one of the guys, I took out my iPhone because I'm trying to get the Uber to come, and he's like, no, 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 put your phone back into your pocket. He's like, you have a new iPhone 13 or whatever the number was at the time. He's
Sure.
like, someone will kill you for this phone because it's a year's worth of salary for them. So he just said, just put it back in your pocket. So it's a relative thing, right?
Yep.
And so for me, just looking at when I'm going places, personal safety is big, but just being mindful of your surroundings. And then when you start to look at the watches or the other things, you want to wear something that's nice, but not too ostentatious or too over the top. I think it's kind of like
Sure.
reading the room, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
and being able
Right.
to know.
Definitely. And I very much agree with you. You have to kind of know where your surroundings are and where you're going. And by the way, we do not shame the Apple Watch on this podcast. We might think certain things, but we do not verbalize them. So this is a safe place for
It's a
sure.
safe place, right? And you look at some of the
Absolutely.
designers that come out now, and I see amazing watches all over. A friend of mine on one of my recent trips into Germany showed me the Omega collection they're doing with Swatch. Really cool. Just a timepiece you could pick up, something that's very simple, but it's got a neat sense of style to it. And so
Yes.
the things that I seem to come across whenever I walk into rooms and see other people, and you notice that it's kind of like I remember hearing the phrase, it's a man's diamond. Not as a sexist comment, but just as a comment of like, oh, it's
Sure.
kind of something that catches the attention of other people in the room. And it's really true. It's definitely something that, kind of brought me into this podcast, but it's also something that you and I have connected on. And it's just a topic
Absolutely.
that's outside of our normal lives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I remember in 2017, we were flying back from, I think, QBRs in Annapolis, and I noticed that you had this beautiful, well loved, but beautiful Rolex Daytona on. And like, I didn't know anything really about watches at that point in time. I was really just starting to learn and take it all in and absorb. But that's when I knew. I was like, watch guy.
Yeah.
This is
And
someone that I want to connect with.
well, what's crazy too, Seth, is like the Daytona is one of the most iconic watches that's out there. But you would not believe how many people around the world I have had stop me, talk to me, and just strike up how much I've been to Geneva, I've gone to the factory, I've been to these places, and the way that the timepiece is designed and what's gone into it. It's really fascinating to think about the significance of something that's iconic. And I think that that's one of the things about this, and I've got this one on today, is like, if you look at this as just an overall timepiece, right? And like, yeah, like you said, it's worn. Let me see if I can get in close
Yeah,
enough.
that is the one. I'll definitely add some shots, but I mean that white dial is stunning. Looks like you
Yeah.
actually have the chronograph on as
Yep.
well, which is
Right.
nice. I feel like not enough people take advantage of that. So you're timing the
Yeah.
show. Fantastic.
But this is the 116520. So it's one of the ones that whenever we think about, like, to me, what's fascinating about it is like, okay, this was introduced in the 60s, and it's part of the desire for Rolex to meet the need of what a professional car driver would want. And like last summer, for example, I was in Munich, Germany, and I drove up to Innsbruck, and I had a friend help hook me up to get a nice Porsche 911 because I'm like, I'm not going to drive on the Autobahn unless I have the right automobile. And we got up to 300 kilometers an hour while we were driving down the road, and it was exhilarating. The last thing I was going to do is take my hand off the wheel to look at my watch or to try to adjust it. So when I think about what the
Mm-hmm.
need was of the watch for a professional race car driver, and you think about the chronograph and being able to actually time your ability to track distance up to 400 kilometers an hour or 400 miles an hour in the way that the bezel and everything's designed, it actually has a significance to it where you can do things. But the movement that's inside it, it replaced the older Zenith one that was there. But like the design itself, it's a 40 millimeter stainless case with the traditional oyster bracelet, you know, so it's got the standard kind of belt and suspenders around it that a Rolex would have, but the distinctive tack, like the bezel, the way that it's put together, not only is functional, but it's really cool. With having the white face, I think that's what really stands out. And so my wife was actually the one who ended up pulling the trigger and getting it for me, which was it was such an amazing gift to receive, but it was for a very special occasion that it was just like it has just so many different pieces of significance for me.
Yeah.
But I took this thing out to Daytona for the Daytona 500 and took a picture of my
Mm-hmm.
watch in front of the speedway. And we went out and I was with the kids and went out and, you know, signed on the track because you can do all that the day before. And I was just thinking about, wonder what Paul Newman, you know, because he kind of elevated the status of this thing.
Of course.
And you look at that older model that he had, and the ways in which, you know, that one was one you had to wind. And there've just been so many people throughout the years that have put this thing on. And so when I see it or see people with it, I usually will go up to him, talk to him, like, where'd you tell me your story? Tell me what you've got and how you got it.
I love that. Well, first, saying a reference number is like oh shit, this is a watch podcast now. Let's go. I feel like once I start going down the reference number line, like I really won't come back from it. But I mean, it's such a beautiful watch. So, where did your interest in watches actually come from?
So, I mean, for me, I think the first time I really came across something that was nice, I was in college. And I remember there were people showing up with these watches on that, again, were nice watches. They had received it like a graduation gift or they'd received in some way, shape, or form. Um, and I started to take notice on kind of what was there. And one of those that caught my attention was in the late 80s, there was a group called TAG, and TAG was acquired Heuer, and they ended up rebranding the company TAG Heuer. And so the whole idea was, okay, we want to blend performance and luxury. Yeah. But what changed for me that started to shed light on the importance of time was in the summer of, this was in 1996. So we're talking a long, long time ago. Was in a martial arts tournament. I got kicked in the chest. I thought I had broken a rib, go to the hospital, get a chest x-ray, and I have a bunch of tumors in my chest. And so I all of a sudden have been, you know, gone from nothing's wrong to, you know, or being diagnosed with some sort of cancer. And it turned out to be a Hodgkin's lymphoma. And they diagnosed it, started me on treatment and all that. So I went through chemo for the better part of a year. So coming out of that, one of the things that I thought was significant was the importance of the time I'm given. And to think about what way can I not waste the time. There was a great Steve Jobs quote that was your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. And so at the point that I was done with the round of treatment, I remember no eyebrows, really no hair, went into a jewelry store in my hometown and like I bought this watch, which is one of the old GTs. And this one, I
Classic.
realized Yeah, it's just a classic. It's white face, two-tone. Went in and got it. And I mean, I thought I spent an enormous amount of money on it. Like stressed when I'm getting it. And I remember one of the things was is that it was a way to refocus in the middle of the day for me about what was important. And it wasn't for me to wear it for other people to see it. It was for me to look down and go, I got to appreciate where I am at this moment because this moment is not going to happen again. Am I doing the right thing with this moment? And it was a weird thing because as a kid, like being in my 20s, right? It's just like that was a very kind of sobering type of way to look at things. But it wasn't a bad way. It was just like a refresh way. So to me, I had that one. I wore it every day for quite a while. But it was a way to kind of reset myself. I'm in the middle of something, something's going on, it's getting carried away, hectic or whatever. You just habitually look at the time, and it would be a way for me to just like recenter.
Right. Yeah. And do you still wear that tag today?
I wear it from time to time. I do. But
Okay.
this one, the significance of this one was on the 10-year anniversary of that date. And so that's
Wow.
where my wife was like, I want to give you something significant because you do value that time that way. It's really all we have. So to me, whenever I think about the time part of it, that's just a big part of it for me is just
Yeah.
respecting the time because it's gone. And once it's gone, you never get it back.
Your story actually really strikes a chord with me as well. I had a near-death experience in college. And so I think about the value of time and it being the most important thing that we have. And one of my favorite quotes is time isn't the main thing, it's the only thing.
Hmm.
Wynton Marsalis said that, the jazz musician. And those words kind of like always like echo in my head when I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, it's a beautiful reminder to work hard, cherish your relationships, be passionate.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right, and that's I think one of the nice things about it is like, are you using that time appropriately? And so
Right.
that for me is one of the big things that whenever I talk to people and ask them kind of what their story is about piece they're wearing. Oh, I got this for a special. Most people will buy these things not just as an investment. Oh, I bought it because I knew it would double in price. That's not what I hear. What I hear from people is this marks a significant moment in my life. I achieved something. I celebrated something.
Yes, definitely. One of my favorites actually is I have a Vacheron Constantin
Mhm.
56 in blue, and I bought that watch to celebrate that I'd actually moved my life from San Francisco to Atlanta with New Relic, and to me that was a huge milestone. I'm actually like kind of like getting like a warm fuzzy even thinking about that moment right now. But I agree. When I have come across people who they just buy them for clout or just to immediately flip it and sell it, you can't turn me off fast enough from that conversation.
Yeah,
It's just so
totally.
opposite to kind of how I think about it. All right, Matt, I've got a couple rapid fire questions for you that I'm curious
All
to get
right.
your take on. In your opinion, what is one of the most overrated watches?
Overrated. I'd say the from my own personal experience, seeing people that will go out of their way to get I don't want to sound rude, but like one of the Panerais that I went and looked at, Luminor, the I don't know if it's the Marina or one of those. I remember looking at it was just not very versatile. I'm not a Panerai hater. I think there's some amazing and beautiful watches, but I think that's one I've seen that looks like for the amount you're getting for
Sure.
what you're paying, it to me seems like it's not as aligned on value. But again, I don't have one, so I can't
Oh,
throw
you mean
stones
this
at
watch that's on my wrist right now, Matt? I'm not wearing that, but
Well, I would
wouldn't
know
that have
because
been?
I went and looked at some of them and they're huge. This is a very cool style, but I feel like I see them anywhere and you can get them anywhere, right?
Yes,
So when you look at a
absolutely,
price point of
absolutely.
10,000 to start and you can get it anywhere at any time, doesn't really make it that unique. It just depends, I think, on what your taste is. And for me, I'd say I really like classic styles that
Okay,
are timeless.
agree. Yeah, it's all personal preference. It's all style, right? And how you choose to dress in a way, and pick your watch out. All right, most underrated watch. What's one that you think people should actually pay a little bit more attention to?
That's a really, really good question. That's one that I feel like some of the Rolexes that I have found to be a little bit underrated. On one hand, I'd say the Submariner sometimes gets a bad rap, but then I look at some of the older models, people will overlook them by the stereotype of, oh, well, those are everywhere you can get them. But whenever you look at like some of the old classic Submariners, those to me, some of those are kind of underrated because they are a unique watch, but they're very historical. I would say that's kind of brand loyalist to the question.
Sure. Well, I mean, honestly, if you're not willing to wear a Rolex that has radiation on the luminous hands, like, are you even like a serious watch collector? Like, I think you have to be willing to get a little radiation poisoning to really appreciate the watch, for sure.
Totally. So when you think about some of those Omegas that are out there, like the old James Bond ones, the ones that went
Yep.
to the
Yep.
moon, the different things that they're so rich in historical value that to me, sometimes that gets a little bit underrated when you see like an old Seamaster, you see some of the different watches that are out there that may not be
Right.
overly expensive, but they look great. But those are ones also that I see they're underrated in the value that they have to the person because they
Yeah.
may not be a valuable watch, but it may be like, oh, this is my grandfather's watch. Oh, tell
I,
me a little bit about him.
oh, I
That's where I
agree.
see that's kind of a way to look at the value being underrated because that's where I just see the story behind it is what becomes the interesting part.
Um, all right. Is there a watch brand that you admire from afar?
Yeah, I would say that the Breitling ones that I have looked at, I
Right.
do think that there's a lot of really amazing ones. I've also really seen Patek Philippe. I don't know how to
No one
pronounce it
knows.
properly.
Even they don't know. It's such a
Yeah,
mystery.
I would say that that has been one of the more interesting and intriguing watches I've seen when I've looked at them up close and like looking at the style. I don't know. I mean, I've seen somewhere they just catch my eye because I don't see them often. And
Sure.
and I think that's the neat thing is noticing it, I think is part of it that I often get introduced to a whole new group of watches just by like, oh, I had no idea this even existed or
Yes.
wasn't one I've seen before.
Yes. Well, as someone who also travels as much as you do and I do, I think one of my favorite games to play is What's on Your Wrist Flight Boarding Edition. So usually I'm not super cool and I get to board first. So usually I'm like somewhere in the middle. And I always am just like going row to row, like what's on the wrist? What's on the
Yeah.
wrist? And I have definitely been super disappointed on lots of flights. Absolutely. But also, I've been blown away every once in a while with a really interesting paddock that someone has on, or a Zenith as well.
Mhm.
I think are super cool. And always then, like, I'll get to my seat and I'll just be like thinking about that watch, start Googling, just like, huh. Do you ever do that as well, or am I just weird?
I do. And I was in a flight going from Munich up to Copenhagen, and I sat next to a guy, and he had a Vacheron. Um, and I don't know if it's Constantin. Really cool looking, really elegant. It was a very pretty watch. Look, and it was just, again, it was just one that I really just didn't know anything
Hmm?
about. And it was interesting just to talk. And the gentleman really valued it and looked at the way in which, the design, the style. It had a leather band, but it just looked really elegant. And I think that just noticing that and then complimenting someone on that. And like you said, you see this stuff and you're like, wow, it's pretty cool. But for me, I'm like, what's the story? What is it? What's the
Right.
angle here? You know?
That is always my question. Tell me the
Yeah.
story behind that watch. Vacheron is probably one of my favorite brands,
Yeah.
so you can't go wrong with pretty much anything they make. Actually, when I was in Switzerland last year on vacation, I went into one of their main boutiques in Luzerne, and I just struck up a conversation with one of the guys working in the store. Of course, like they had no actual watches for sale because they were either on loan or spoken for, but they could tell I genuinely loved Vacheron. Like I own one. I think the history is amazing. And he was like, "You want to see something cool?" I was like, "Yes, I sure do." And he like took me in the back to where they were actually servicing a
Hmm.
Vacheron Overseas, which is kind of their like steel sports watch. They also do them in some precious metals too. And it was just a watchmaker servicing the movement. The full case back was off. I got to see the rotor and the inner workings, and it was just kid in a candy store, magical moment. And I came in really liking the brand. I left loving it. It was just such a
That's
cool experience that they like treated me to. I've got like one more burning question for you,
yeah.
and then we'll start to wrap a couple of things if that sounds good.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, perfect. So, as someone who no longer lives in San Francisco, but I miss it dearly and I think about it all the time, I need to know, Matt, like, what are the people wearing in San Francisco these days?
I mean, I see a lot of wearables. That's the crazy thing is that I personally am not going into San Francisco as much. I mean, you remember when we used to work together, everyone was downtown every day. You would be around people. I live in the area and I very rarely go into town now.
Yeah,
But when I do, Apple Watches, Google Watches, wearables are what I really see if anyone has something that's sticking out. But when you
yeah,
go down on the streets down in the marina or Cal Hollow or out in Fillmore, it seems like life is normal. Everybody's there. People are still wearing very nice things. I have seen several Rolexes, the IWCs, the different Breitlings and so on that are there. And it seems like people are living their normal life. They're just doing things as is, kind of like what it used to be.
yeah, definitely. I honestly thought you were maybe going to say those Omega Swatch collaborations.
Hmm.
I've actually started to see those all around Atlanta in like every flavor of different color that those things come in. So I was curious if like San Francisco was also kind of hopping on that train a little bit more. I think they're actually really cool
I do
watches.
too.
I have one of the Blancpain Swatch
Hmm.
collaborations in black, and I'll admit I wear that watch a lot now. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that like you like what you like what you like and you see
You
the
like what you
style
like?
and that's kind of the part of the uniqueness, right? Because when you get asked, "Hey, where'd you get that?" You have a story. But I do like the Swatch. I think those are neat collaboration with the Omega side because they did bring something unique to the table. It wasn't just a collab to do it that way. It was like, let's do something, but let's create it and then let's give it a theme that has a bit of a story behind it so it can kind of start the storytelling. And I think that part of it to me, looking at the price point and looking at where you get in on that type of watch, you give someone something to talk about with it. It's not just a watch that tells time.
Right. And of course, Swatch Group, they are hoping, probably successfully in some areas, that it's like the gateway drug where someone is like, you know what? A
Totally.
Speedmaster actually does sound pretty good. I
Absolutely.
guarantee there's been some great conversion across the board on that. Because also,
But
like, now it's the first time where someone who maybe like wasn't a watch person is like, huh, Omega.
yeah.
I'd like to
Well,
learn more
exactly.
about that.
Well, it's like I remember seeing David Beckham wearing one of these Daytonas and being like, "That's my watch. That's this. We got the same watch. We have something in common."
Right.
And it's like you see. I mean, like a Tom Cruise has one. Not that I am comparing myself to them, but it's just like it's kind of cool to be like, yeah,
Yeah.
they appreciate it enough and they like it enough that, and I feel like Swatch is trying to do that right now. They're trying
Hmm.
to rebuild the image of what that the value is, and it's not just the monetary value, but there's the storytelling aspect.
Definitely. And actually, I think you can compare yourself to Tom Cruise because he is not a top hand model and you are. So you've actually got that on him.
Yeah, I don't even know where that came from because I honestly don't even I've never won an award for my hands. So
It
I
admittedly came from my head and I fully made it up when I was doing prep notes. I was just like, I'm gonna see if I can throw Matt Gray, one of the most like put together people I know, and just like throw him off. Well, Matt, thank you so much again for taking the time to come on the show with me. Please, like, let me know what's going on with Tealium right now that we should know about.
Tealium connects data so customers, brands can connect with their customers. So when we talk about these watchmakers, a Rolex, a Breitling, you're not usually going to the store on your first step to buy a watch. You do your research online. And most of the folks that are on this podcast or listen to it, you may be driving on a commute. You're probably also, you have a window open looking at the watches we're talking about. And so you leave this long list of, these digital breadcrumbs everywhere. And so what the watchmaker wants to do is figure out, are you really interested? And then how do they get you to buy? That's basically what we do. And the playing field is all the brands are fighting for your attention. So if you've just looked up the different watches we talked about, Omega, Rolex, Breitling, IWC, you will now probably see in your Gmail in the next 24 hours an email from one of those manufacturers or all of them. And that's what we're dealing with now.
Fantastic. Matt, dude, this has been so much fun. Thank you again for coming on the show. And thank you also to our sponsors. Actually, I still have 0 sponsors. So if one of those brands wants to find me, they absolutely can. Well, technically I'm sponsored by MongoDB because I have a job through them. Therefore, I get to spend some extra time doing this, which I absolutely love. So it's a good balance for me. So thank you to our sponsor, MongoDB, who is just my regular employer. But seriously, for everyone listening, I really appreciate tuning in. If you liked the episode, please like and subscribe. And also, if you'd like to message me to get some help finding a watch for yourself or someone else, or you want to find the best place to buy it, email me at watchthetechpod@gmail.com, and I'm more than happy to help you out. So thank you so much. We'll end the episode now.